Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I wanted to take a look at some junior drivers, some young drivers, who I think have a real chance of getting into Formula One in the next couple of years, next 3 or 4 years, I would say. So for this video, I'm going to be looking primarily at drivers in Formula 2 and Formula 3 and talking about which ones I think have a real chance to make it into Formula One and potentially be future stars in the series. So at this point in the year, as well as we're going through summer, this is kind of really when summer silly season really kicks off, and this is when we start discussing who's going where for the following Formula One season. So I thought it was a really good opportunity to talk about some drivers, and maybe one or two names on this list may even end up in Formula One next year. So I'm going to be going through them in no particular order. I think I'm going to go from probably most likely in immediately to probably a bit more long shot prospects at the end. But before I start, I have a couple drivers I just want to give an honorable mention to that I'm not talking about in this video, but I do think are very good drivers in their own right, and that include Alex Palou, IndyCar champion, very good driver as well. I do think he's a bit of a long shot though to get into Formula One. Robert Schwartzman, former Ferrari Jr., very good record in Formula 3, Formula 2, kind of a shame how the timing worked out with him getting to Formula 1, but so be it. Franco Colapinto, F3 driver with Williams Academy. Paul Aron, F3 driver in Mercedes. Gabriele Bianchi, Alpine driver in F3. And Martens Stenshorn, Norwegian driver who I believe isn't affiliated with any academy right now. So those are just kind of the honorable mentions. So starting first off with a driver who could be looking at a Formula One seat next year, and that is Liam Lawson. So for Lawson, Red Bull Jr. obviously, and if he makes it into F1 next year, it will be with AlphaTauri. Currently he's doing his first year of Super Formula, currently second in the championship. I haven't been watching the races. I probably should be, but from what I've read online, he's been very good. Races have been excellent. The qualifying has been a bit lacking. Could be a little bit better in qualifying, but that being said, really good. And he's looked like an extremely adaptable driver in everything he's raced, whether it be Super Formula, DTM, Formula 2. He's looked very adaptable, and he's very quick to get up to that pace. Qualifying pace, I think, is a little bit something that needs a bit of work on, but his race pace through all the series I've talked about has been very good. And depending on how things go with Perez, Ricciardo, and Tsunoda next year, he could be looking at an AlphaTauri seat next year. And I think after that, that's really probably the most obvious prospect. And then after that, I think there's quite a few drivers up in the air. But a driver that I've been very impressed by this year in Formula 2 has been this guy, Oliver Bearman, Ferrari Jr. He's very young, first year in Formula 2. He came third I believe, in his first year in Formula 3. Got promoted to Formula 2 this year in the Prima team, and he's looked very good. Of course, he's been a bit behind his teammate Frederick Festi, who of course has also been a very good driver this year. But that being said, I do think that the raw pace and the race pace has been excellent, I think. Let's see, next, I just finish off. Of course, being a Ferrari Jr. driver, the most logical option would be Haas, now that given that Alfa Romeo is becoming the Audi works team. That being said, Haas have been very vocal about not wanting to put rookies in their team after how things went with Mazepin and Schumacher. So that being said, it does seem like there's not really a super logical path to get into F1. But that being said, he has looked very good, fourth so far in his first year, and he's definitely a guy who could make the leap up in, not next year, but maybe the year after. Next, I want to talk about a driver who's also been very good in his first year in Formula 2. Victor Martens. So fifth in Formula 2, a member of the Alpine Academy. He won Formula 3 last year in his second year. This year in his first year, he's in fifth place. He's looked very fast all year. On one lap pace, he's looked almost equal to his very experienced teammate Porsche. Races have been a bit more tricky, especially early in the season. He was making a lot of mistakes in the races, had just a lot of Things happened to him, some out of his control, that led to him losing a lot of points. But he's been really making up for it recently, and he's looked very, very good the last 3 or 4 rounds. And of course, I don't think he will. He will not get into F1 next year. Gasly and Ocon are both under contract, but I could see Alpine replacing one of them with Martens if he has a really good year next year in Formula 2. Of course, being French and Alpine, it doesn't hurt. Next, let's see. I'm gonna talk about this driver next. So, Frederick Festi, I almost forgot about it. I had forgotten to write him down on my notes, but of course, oh yeah, I should talk about him. Fred Festi, currently leading Formula 2, Mercedes young driver. Do think he's a bit of an interesting prospect. I've been watching him since his first year in Formula 3, and to be honest, that first year in Formula 3 didn't look that impressive. He had a bit of a drop off the next year when he went to ART for his second year of Formula 3, and then first year of Formula 2 was quite so-so. But this year has been really excellent, driving for Prema, so of course you may be able to ask some questions about how much of it is because of him, and how much of it is Prema being very strong. Qualifying pace has been very good, race pace has been very good, and it is his second year in Formula 2, so he's still kind of within the 2-year window of Formula 2 champions in theory, who in theory should have a good chance of getting to Formula 1. Of course, for him, the logical place to be would be one of the Mercedes customer teams, so likely Williams. But that being said, Toto Wolff and Mercedes haven't been so optimistic about him, and they really seem to be wanting to position Schumacher for that seat if Williams were to drop Logan Sargent, which I don't think they will, but that's for another video. But that being said, if Festi wins Formula 2, it could make for a bit of an interesting situation next year. Let's see, next I'm going to go with another Red Bull driver. Ayumu Iwasa, a Japanese driver in Formula 2. Currently, let's see, he is 3rd in the championship, 2nd year in the series, which is pretty good. Last year in his rookie season, he was 6th, which was also a fairly decent season. For Iwasa, he's quite quick, very good in wet conditions. Race pace is also generally pretty good. The qualifying, I think, does need a little bit of work. And I think if I compare him to Tsunoda, I do not think he's quite as good as Tsunoda at the same point. Of course, remember Tsunoda, being Japanese driver, I think there's always going to be a lot of those comparisons made. And Tsunoda, of course, finished 3rd in his first year in Formula 2, and by the end of the season, he did look like the outright fastest driver, both in qualifying and in race pace in Formula 2. But with Iwasa, I don't really see that, so I do think there will be some questions about how good he is and how much of a ceiling he has. I think also probably being behind Lawson in Red Bull's pecking order also makes it hard for him, because Red Bull would basically have to either ditch Lawson, or they would have to basically vacate 2 seats for both of them for next year. So I don't think he's going to be in Formula 1 next year. 2025 could be an option if he does the same route, follows the same route that Lawson did, finish Formula 2, and then go to Super Formula for a year, which would of course be in his home country, Japan, and then maybe look at options for 2025. The other interesting thing with him is that because he is effectively a Honda junior driver as well, Honda may be interested in having him be in the team, in the Aston Martin Honda partnership team in 2025 when that does, or 2026 when that does commence. So that's definitely something that will be interesting to look for. But that being said, of course, Aston Martin, I don't think they'd be dropping Stroll for Iwasa, and of course, we don't really know what Alonso would be doing at that point. All right, next, I'm gonna talk about oh dear, not enough space to write his name, but whatever. All right, Théo Pourchaire. So Pourchaire is a really interesting one. I remember watching his first year in Formula 3, was extremely impressed by his speed as a 16-year-old in his rookie season in the ART. Some people forget, but he almost beat Piastri in that championship. And I think people had really, really high expectations for him going into that first year in Formula 2. And maybe in hindsight, he maybe should have spent another year in Formula 3, but he showed so much that first year, he didn't really have a lot to learn. First year of Formula 2 was decent. I believe he finished 6th in the championship, Last year, second in the championship in second year, which is a pretty decent as well, but really far off Felipe Drugovich. And this year, second in the championship as well, much closer, and he's in a very tight championship fight this year with Festi, who I've mentioned here. But that being said, it would be his third year, and I think given how the whole Nick DeVries experiment went in AlphaTauri recently, I do think that F1 teams will continue to be quite hesitant with third-year Formula 2 champions. That being said, he's still very young. I believe he's only 19, so he would be much younger than DeVries was when he won that championship. But to me, it really feels like, in terms of his ability, it really feels like he started to plateau a bit recently, even though he's quite young, and he's not really showing that kind of development that you would be hoping as he gets older. So, and of course, he is a Alfa Romeo Jr, which is a bit of an interesting one. And given that Joe doesn't have a contract for next year, in theory, there is a seat there that he could take in Formula One in the Alfa Romeo next year. Well, it will be Sauber next year, but that being said, I do think that this point between Joe and Porsche, I do think that Joe would have the upper hand. And if he doesn't get that seat, I do think he's kind of out of luck for chances in Formula One, and he'd probably have to start looking elsewhere, whether it be Formula E, Super Formula, or endurance racing. Alright, next, I think, so now we've kind of gotten the two more long shot options, and these are drivers that are not in Formula 2 currently. And the first one is Gabriele Bianchi, so current championship leader in Formula 3 from Brazil. I thought I was fairly certain he was part of a driver academy before I did this video, but then I actually checked and he's not. So that does could definitely complicate things for him. For Bianchi, he's looked very good in Formula 3 this year. Runaway championship leader, which does set him up nicely for being a promotion to Formula 2 next year. That being said, he's not part of any driver academy, so there's not really a logical fit for where a logical path for how he would progress to Formula 1. Last year in Formula Regional European Series, he finished 6th. Wasn't in a Prima though, so that's a bit understandable given how strong Prima is in that series. But that being said, I do think many people consider this year's Formula 3 field to be quite weak, which is why I haven't really included that many other Formula 3 drivers. That being said, he has looked very good, looked very quick on the race pace, and looked very good in qualifying as well. So definitely a name to look out for in the next 2 to 3 years. And the last driver I wanted to talk about in this video is Kimmy Andrea Antonelli. So Mercedes young driver driving in Formula Regional European Championship. Very fast driver, guy who has a lot of speed. Won Italian F4 last year, won Formula Regional Asia last year, won many championships in karting. Currently second in Formula Regional European Series, 1 point behind the championship leader, Martens, who I mentioned earlier. The only reason I put Antonelli in this video and not Stenshorn is just because Antonelli is part of a driver academy, so which makes things a lot easier in terms of future progression through the racing pyramid. With Stenshorn, he isn't, so that does for now make things much more difficult for him. But for Antonelli, he's Mercedes young driver. Looks like has a very good chance of winning. FRECA, of course, very close with Stenshorn right now. Next year will almost certainly be in Formula 3, and so he's a guy that I think we could really be looking out for in the next three years at earliest, I would say. A guy who can be in Formula 1, maybe 2025, 2026 at earliest. So that's all for this video. I think there's a couple other drivers that I think I could have included. Zane Maloney in Formula 2, Jack Doohan. That being said, they're either very young and they're behind quite a few other drivers in that same kind of driver academy, or I don't really see them having a realistic shot or any kind of pathway to getting into Formula 1. Of course, this doesn't include pay drivers, guys who could, in theory, pay their way into the series, guys like, think along the lines of like a Latifi or a Mazepin, but with those drivers, it's generally much harder to predict them getting into the series. So for now, I've just talked about guys who are, for the most part of driver academies, and guys who do have a realistic path of getting into Formula 1. So that's all for this video, just highlighting a couple of young drivers I think have a good chance of getting into a possibility of getting into Formula 1 in the next 3 to 4 years. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to keep watching my videos, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the video. Goodbye.